Hey everyone, happy Monday. Okay, so I'm just going to dive in because I have some updates with everything that we were talking about with the cloud seeding after the Texas flooding. And apparently we aren't the only ones. This is like all I'm seeing when I'm on social media. Everyone's talking about it. And someone that I never really expected to get in on this conversation is RFK's former running mate, Nicole Shanahan. Remember her? Haven't seen her in a
Yep.
while. Well, she released a report last week called the Dark Maha Report on Geoengineering, where she shared all these claims from this high level government whistleblower, which basically confirmed that the US geoengineering efforts have not been stopped. So they're still going on. And Trump initially paused them, but now, according to this whistleblower, they've been rebranded and continue under terms like solar radiation management and stratospheric aerosol injection. So the whistleblower, I tried getting more information, but they're anonymous at this point. But apparently, it's a former contractor with security clearances tied to the DoD, DOE, NOAA, and multiple intelligence agencies. And so, according to the whistleblower, there's like all of these federal grants that are under new names like climate intervention, solar radiation modification, stratospheric aerosol intervention. And they're getting funding, but it's geoengineering research. They're just calling it a different name. And this did not surprise me at all because remember back when you were going through like all the wasteful spending that Doge uncovered, and we saw pretty much every day there was some type of like climate change title. As long as climate was in the title, they were getting a ton of funding. So I feel like that's what's happening here. And it doesn't sound like it's geoengineering because they just put it under some kind of a climate title, but that's absolutely what it is. And so the report highlighted that the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research received over $230 million dollars with all of these documents that are access restricted. And the whistleblower said that pretty much all these projects have been renamed in order to bypass FOIA. So people can't, put in a Freedom of Information request on them because you're never going to know because it's under some like random name. And so the whistleblower pointed to a 2023 solar radiation management report naming NOAA, NASA, the DOE, USGS, and NSF all as participants. And agencies like the NOAA were funding these projects, these solar radiation management projects, aka geoengineering. And I guess there's like $1.2 million dollars from them across several grants, which completely goes against their public stance where they've publicly denied geoengineering. And the other thing is that these projects go all the way back to the 1960s. And I guess there was like a big report in 1979 called the NOAA Weather Modification Report. And it outlined at that time nearly 100 projects that were going on. So just imagine from 79 till now, like how many more projects there are. So it's nothing new, but people are becoming more aware of it. They're getting all of this scrutiny. The media is now talking about it. And then you have all these states, like Florida, and now there's a few others that are putting bans on geoengineering. And then on top of that, you have flooding occurring, which I guess there was another flood in Texas, another one in New Mexico. And so it's just getting a ton of public scrutiny. So the same day that Nicole Shanahan posts this report on X, the EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin, comes out and gives a public statement. So I don't know if this was just, because she posted that or because of the Texas flooding, but here's what he's got to say.
Urgent and important questions about geoengineering and contrails. The American public deserves and expects honesty and transparency from their government when seeking answers. But for years, people who asked questions in good faith were dismissed, even vilified by the media and their own government. That era is over. The Trump EPA is committed to total transparency. As a result, I tasked my team at EPA to compile a list of everything we know about contrails and geoengineering for the purpose of releasing it to you now publicly. In other words, I want you to know everything I know about these topics and without any exception. Instead of simply dismissing these questions and concerns as baseless conspiracies, we're meeting them head on. We did the legwork, looked at the science, consulted agency experts, and pulled in relevant outside information to put these online resources together. Everything we know about contrails to solar geoengineering will be in there. Concerned Americans.
Okay, Tara. I don't know about you, but that reminded me of someone from the Biden administration, like reading off a teleprompter saying,
Yes.
oh, yeah, we're going to give all this information. And then what? Is it going to be like the Epstein files where we get nothing? And they say, like, oh, it's all made up. There's nothing to see here because he's saying they're going to release all this stuff because there's all this media pressure. But then he doesn't really give any information. He just says, oh, we're going to release a report and it'll all be in there.
Yeah, I'm not holding out hopes for this one, to be honest. And let me ask you first, did our account get banned for the last couple episodes where we've like talked about cloud seeding?
No, surprisingly, it didn't. But then again, like everyone on TikTok is talking about it. So what are they just going to ban
Mhm.
everybody on the app, you know?
Exactly. And that's what I think. Like these Texas floods have made weather modification a mainstream talking point. And literally everyone's talking about it. But the MSM is still taking the perspective that it's all conspiracy theory. So I want to play this clip that I found on CNN. It's Caitlin Collins, and she's interviewing the founder and CEO of Rainmaker, which we talked about last week. And the guy's name is Augustus Dorico. And I guess he's getting threats because of what's happening in Texas. And he's basically claiming that, the cloud seeding he did on July 2nd that his company did had nothing to do with the flooding, and it's all just a conspiracy theory. And to her credit, I will say Caitlin Collins did talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene introducing the bill in Congress last week that would make weather modification a felony. And she played a short clip of Tim Burchett, and he basically said, like, conspiracy theories don't get patented. And cloud seeding is patented. So clearly it's not a conspiracy theory. But I want to get your take on what this guy says about the flooding in Texas.
My source tonight is Augustus Dorico, the founder of Rainmaker, which is a cloud seeding startup that carried out a job about 100 miles southeast of Kerr County 2 days before the July 4th storm. And it's great to have you here tonight because I want to give you a chance to respond to what we heard from those lawmakers. But just first to give people a sense of what this has meant for you and for your employees, can you describe what the last few days have been like for you?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. First and foremost, my heart goes out to all of the people in Texas, particularly the families that were directly affected by the natural disaster. Even though cloud seeding had nothing to do with it, we can get into the details of that. People online have accused both me and Rainmaker of having caused the floods when cloud seeding unequivocally cannot induce precipitation, even nearly on the scale of what came from the remnants of Tropical Storm Barry. Most people that we've engaged with in good faith, trying to transparently share information with, have been very receptive. And to them, I'm grateful. I am praying for my family constantly. I'm praying for myself. There have been threats leveled against us, most of which I think are incredible. But I'm grateful to be on here tonight just to set the record straight and clarify what cloud seeding can do so that people stop accusing Rainmaker and my family of having contributed to the floods.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't even know what cloud seeding is fully. I mean, some people certainly do, but meteorologists have said there's not a connection between these flash floods and what your company is doing. But can you just walk us through what you did do on July 2nd, just so people have an understanding of that?
Yeah, so first of all, cloud seeding is a real technology that was invented in the United States in the 40s. And the premise is that some clouds don't naturally precipitate because the water droplets within them stay too small to ever grow heavy enough to fall. What cloud seeding does is it flies drones or planes up into those clouds with non-precipitating water, releases a material called silver iodide, which has a crystalline structure similar to ice. The water then freezes onto those crystals, grows into big enough snowflakes such that they fall and either remain as snow or melt back into rain. This is a climate adaptation tool that we can use to restore ecosystems and preserve farms in drought-ridden areas that are suffering from decreases in precipitation over time. In Texas, we're contracted by multiple municipalities and also farms to produce more water for them in times of drought. And on July 2nd, we flew one 20-minute cloud seeding flight where we dispersed about 70 grams worth of silver iodide over tens of square miles into two different clouds. And it's worth saying as well, we disperse this material directly into the clouds. It's not dispersed just into the open air. After about 2 hours, those clouds dissipated entirely, and any of the material that we dispersed then would not have remained in the system such that it could have induced any additional precipitation by the time that the remnants of the tropical storm came in.
And obviously, it was a huge storm, as we saw as a result of this. But so when you hear people and
Okay, we don't need to get into the rest of it. I want to know what you think about what he said.
So he has been on the media circuit saying the same thing over and over again. Like, yes, we absolutely cloud seeded, but it didn't cause the flooding that preceded the cloud seeding. And like, what, we're just supposed to be like, okay. You know, the founder of the company, obviously he's not going to be like, yeah, we cloud seeded and this was a result. But I mean, what it's BS. Like
I
you
mean, is he?
cloud seeded and a massive flood followed. We've seen this happen in Dubai. We've seen it happen in China. Like, why would we not think that has anything to do with it? I'm sorry. It's just like I'm not buying it at all.
No, because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but my interpretation of that was him saying they cloud seeded this like specific amount and then the clouds dispersed within 2 hours. So like, did they even produce any rain? Like, what was the point if they like the clouds dispersed in 2 hours and then suddenly there's this like big storm like a day later?
Right.
Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense at all. And from everything that I was researching on it, it said absolutely it could take effect, days later, but it wasn't even days later. Like literally the very next morning was when the weather alerts started coming in, like, hey, this storm is going to be worse than we thought. There's,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, like, I'm just not buying it. And again, I don't think that he went and like started a storm. Like it doesn't form a storm. I think there was an existing system that they messed with and made it stronger, just like what I think happened with Hurricane Milton and Helene. And do I think it was intentional? Probably not. I mean, I don't know. But let me tell you something else about Augustus, okay? This guy who owns Rainmaker, founded Rainmaker with millions of dollars in seed funding. He's 25 years old. 25 years old, dropped out of UC Berkeley, became a Thiel Fellow, meaning Peter Thiel, the
Mhm.
elite, globalist Peter Thiel, and then from there got all this money for Rainmaker. So like I don't know. I don't trust him. I don't trust this company. I think there's ties to all kinds of things. And of course, he's going to do damage control because the whole world is talking about it right now. And I mean, you can't just take his word for it. Obviously, he's biased. It's his company. He has a lot to lose.
Yeah.
So I think there needs to be an investigation. But is there going to be? No, because again, the people who hired him are it's the Texas government, the counties. Like, they're not going to admit fault. So the whole thing is just going to get swept under the rug. But I think that enough people are awake to what's happening now. And just like Caitlin Collins said, or Tim Burchett, about how This stuff is patented. You can't say it's a conspiracy when it's patented. There's multiple patents on it that have been around for like 80 years. And you can't put a ban on a conspiracy. There's
Right.
bans all over the place. You can't write something into law that's a conspiracy. So we're not buying. I think they're thinking, people are dumb enough to fall for this, but no, that's not what's happening here. So, okay. So there was that. Well, then we've got to talk more about Epstein. I know we like briefly touched on this, but this is the other thing that's just, it's not going away. Everyone's talking about it from, the mainstream media to TikTok and social media. So I'm sure everyone's heard this by now, but I'm just going to play it and then I want to get your opinion, Tara. But this clip that's been going around of Trump's cabinet meeting, where Attorney General Pam Bondi is asked about the whole Epstein thing, and like Trump jumps in and gives a response. And I think this is what's really sparking so much backlash that we're going to talk about. But let me just play that clip in case anyone hasn't heard it.
Exchange left some lingering mysteries. One of the biggest ones is whether he ever worked for a American or foreign intelligence agency. The former Labor Secretary, who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of his death?
Sure. Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
Sure. First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child porn is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day. To him being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that. And the minute missing from the video, we released the video showing definitively the video was not conclusive, but the evidence prior to it was showing he committed suicide. And what was on that, there was a minute that was off the counter. And what we learned from Bureau of Prisons was every night, they redo that video. It's old, from like 1999. So every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing. So we're looking for that video to release that as well, showing that a minute is missing every.
So, there's a minute missing. It just happens to be right when he supposedly kills himself. But what do you think of this? Because when I saw that, I'm just like, what the hell are you doing, Trump? Like, I feel like that just made everything so much worse.
100%. And that's like, and I was listening, Megyn Kelly like went on a fucking rant for 2 days about this. Like, just, she will not let it go. And I like everything she was saying, I was like, yeah, like that was my first thought, because what the fuck was he doing? Like, she said Megyn said that Trump was trying to give Pam Bondi an out. So like, I'm going to step in. So like, you don't have to answer the question. Like, this is old news. You don't need to talk about this. But she didn't like pick up on the cues, and like, she just went forward and answered it anyway. I think him doing that was a huge fuck up. And
Yes.
it's just, I have so much to say about this, but I'm going to I'm gonna wait a second because I want to play a clip before I do.
Yeah, I know. I think that's probably correct, like giving her an out because I mean, I don't know what you think, but just reading her body language, I think she's drowning in this job. Like, I don't think she's doing a good job. I'm not saying she's a bad person or like whatever, but I think I said this in the last time we talked about it. If someone had gotten to her, I think you could flip her like that. Like, I think I could flip her just like being a little aggressive. She doesn't seem strong enough to handle this.
She's not believable. She is
Right.
not, I mean, listening to her up there, and her focus is on how disgusting Epstein is. Like everybody fucking knows that already. And
Right.
that's really not what people even care about.
Yeah.
Like we want the truth of where all this information is.
Right.
And she's just like focusing on the wrong things, and it's making her look really, really bad. And it's
Right.
making the whole administration look bad.
Well, I feel like that one line that he said, which probably was not planned, he just like flies off the cuff, but I feel like it was just like you're gaslighting the people. Like Epstein, people are still talking about Epstein. It's like, don't play dumb. This was probably the most asked question when he was on the campaign trail. And he's going to just act like nobody cares about this. Like, everyone cares about this. And you promise transparency. So I just think the way he said it, like, just made him look bad. It made the administration look bad. It pissed off his base. And I mean, it's not good. Like, people are not going to let this go.
No, and the thing that she was saying about, I think bringing up the minute loss in the video was a dumb move because
Yes.
now it's got everybody focusing on that. And you have all these like tech companies that are doing these deep dives into the video. And I've read like several articles. I guess there was two independent video forensics experts that were consulted by Wired. And they said this, quote unquote, raw video is not raw video at all. And that it's very clearly shows signs that it was processed using some kind of Adobe product. They said most likely Premiere, based on metadata that specifically references file extensions used by the video editing software, and that it was assembled from at least two clips, saved multiple times, exported, and then uploaded to the DOJ's website. So it's like they're just digging themselves further into this hole by trying to
Mhm.
bury all this, and it does not fucking look good.
No, it looks terrible. And especially on top of like they already knew people were giving so much scrutiny about Dan Bongino and Cash Patel and the way they looked like someone was holding a gun to their head? So knowing that, like, why would you make that comment? And I know he's probably regretting it. I mean, I say stupid shit all the time, but it's just like that really dug
The
them deep.
the difference is you and I both say stupid shit all the time, but we're the first to call ourselves out on our stupid shit and
Right,
admit when we've said something that was a mistake or a fuck up. And that's not
right.
what's happening here.
Well, and the other thing that's really annoying me is like you can tell how like they're picking and choosing their words so carefully when it comes to like what they actually say about it. So like notice how Pam Bondi, she didn't say that Epstein wasn't an agent because that's the question they asked. There's sources that say he was an agent. She never said he wasn't. All she said was she has no knowledge of that. So it's like
Mhm.
they pick and choose where they're not going to outright lie, but she's just going to say, like, plead the fifth. Well, I don't know. I don't have that information. So
It
it's
it
like,
was it was even like when Caroline Levitt said, "I refer you to the DOJ." Like that was classic fucking KJP style, and that is
Mhm.
not traditionally what she does. Like she's very like outright answering questions. And when it came to this, she did not address the question. She referred it to the DOJ. And that's like, what again, what are you doing? You're deflecting.
Yes. And okay, so I'll get your take on this, but you know how Caroline Levitt always has that like big cross necklace that she
Hmm.
wears all the time for everything? She wasn't wearing it that day. And everyone's like, because she knew she was going to have to get in front of everyone and lie. And so they were showing all these clips of like all these other things she's talked about where she's wearing the cross and like, but yeah, I mean, I felt bad for her because what are you going to do? Like she has nothing to
Right.
work with. Like they screwed up. So yeah, I would refer it to them too. Like you handle this mess that you've made. Um, but I want to play a clip of Tucker Carlson about what he said at the Turning Point USA Student Action Summit, which I guess was in Tampa. Like I wish I
Oh,
would have gone, but anyhow, I
yeah.
got the clip, so I'm gonna play that. And he definitely thinks that Epstein was an agent for Israel, and he kind of lays it all out. So here's what he said.
And I think the real answer is Jeffrey Epstein was working on behalf of intel services, probably not American. And we have every right to ask, on whose behalf was he working? How does a guy go from being a math teacher at the Dalton School in the late 70s with no college degree to having multiple airplanes, a private island, and the largest residential house in Manhattan? Where did all the money come from? And no one has ever gotten to the bottom of that because no one has ever tried. And moreover, it's extremely obvious to anyone who watches that this guy had direct connections to a foreign government. Now, no one's allowed to say that that foreign government is Israel because we have been somehow cowed into thinking that that's naughty. There is nothing wrong with saying that. There is nothing hateful about saying that. There's nothing anti-Semitic about saying. There's nothing even anti-Israel about saying that. I've spent my entire life pretty much in Washington, where I knew and loved a number of people, including one very close person who worked at CIA. That has never prohibited me from saying, I think the CIA has done some horrible things, murdered a bunch of people, participated in the murder of a sitting US president. It's got a whole trail of crimes. That doesn't make me a disloyal American. It doesn't make me anti-American in any sense. I was born here. My family's been here for hundreds of years. I love this country. That's why I live here. So criticizing the behavior of a government agency does not make you a hater. It makes you a free person. It makes you a citizen. You're allowed to do that because you're not a slave. You're a citizen. And you have a right to expect that your government will not act against your interests. And you have a right to demand that foreign governments not be allowed to act against your interests. That's not creepy. It shouldn't be forbidden. And yet all of us have trained ourselves to believe that you can't say that somehow, that that's like too naughty and forbidden. And the effect of making that off limits has been to create a lot of resentment. And I'll say it, hate online, where people feel like they can't just say, like, what the hell is this? You have the former Israeli prime minister living in your house. You have had all this contact with the foreign government. Were you working on behalf of Mossad? Were you running a blackmail operation on behalf of foreign government? By the way, every single person in Washington, D.C. thinks that. I've never met anyone who doesn't think that. I don't know any of them that hate Israel, but no one feels they can say that. Why? And I think the longer that we play along with it, the more subterranean and creepy and hateful the conversation actually becomes. So I think it's better just to say it right out loud. Did this happen? And of course, that question has been asked to the government of Israel, and their answer is, we're not going to tell you. And I think our answer should be, no.
Okay.
I have a lot to say about this. And I want to ask you, like, okay, so my husband and I were talking in the car because we did a lot of driving this weekend and we were listening to all these podcasts. And he was like, I don't understand what's up with Tucker Carlson lately. Like, he's really shifted, his behavior basically. And I was like, yeah, because he is very much like this anti-interventionist. Like he is not like diehard MAGA, like at all. He is a conservative Republican, but he is like an America First conservative. And a lot of things that are going on right now don't seem to be very America First. And I agree with that. And I think like I just want to get your take because I think this is creating even further divide in the Republican Party because you've got Tucker, you've got Megyn Kelly, you've got Jack Sobiak, you have all these big MAGA supporters who are now being very outspoken against some of what the Trump administration is doing. And now you have like progressives that are rooting for Tucker Carlson, which, you definitely didn't see that before. And like he's slamming all anything that's like pro-war, anything that's related to this narrative. And like I really think there's this split that's taking place now between like the establishment, which we already know, but this like anti-interventionist mode. Like, what do you think?
Yeah. So, well, I was kind of thinking the same thing as your husband for a while there because it seemed like Tucker was really going off the deep end. Same with like Candace
Mhm.
Owens. And I'm just like, okay, I get being, anti-war, but it was like, I felt like he was just trying to like stir shit. And it hurts the Republican Party or the MAGA movement, whatever you want to call it. It's like America first. I think when you have that infighting. But with the Epstein thing, I think the reason why so many people are getting on board with this, and it's not just Tucker Carlson, like literally everyone at that Turning Point USA was talking about this and were pissed and they were calling out Trump. So it's not just
Yeah.
Tucker anymore. And I think it's because Epstein, in my mind, and I think in just in general, represents the globalist elites. It's like
Yeah.
we know all the people that were on those flight logs, like, and it's just so deflating because I think a lot of people expected Trump's going to come in this time. He's smarter. He's got a better team. He's going to like dismantle the deep state. And I think this was a sign to everyone that this is just not going to happen. The deep state is very much there, and this is going to get swept under the rug. And that's a sign that like it's the same shit that's happening, and we're never going to get the answers that we want. And it's not just Tucker saying that at this point, it's everyone. But I do think it hurts the right because
Yeah.
now instead of looking at all the things that Trump is doing well, this is all the media is going to focus on. The left now has some another thing that they can go and campaign on and talk about. And while we're all fighting about Epstein, there's it's like a distraction to bigger things that are going on. So I'm not saying like we
Because
shouldn't talk about it, but you
no,
know,
because Trump is doing a lot of amazing things right now, and they are all being overshadowed by this Epstein case. And
yeah,
that's again why I think him stepping in like he did at that press conference and saying what he said just ignited the flames of this fire to like a full inferno.
right. Well, and here's the thing, because a lot of people are like, okay, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel have spent the last however many years talking publicly about Epstein and how there's no way he killed himself. And then they just flip like that. And how, like, why didn't they just, all they had to do is say, you know what? We got in there and the files that we got are gone. Like, why couldn't they
Right.
just take that route? But instead, it's like you're you're acting like we're all stupid. And I don't like that. And so I go back to what I said, I think it was last week, where I've played this so many times in my mind. The only thing that makes sense to me is that he was some type of an agent, informant, whatever, and that's why everyone's keeping their mouth shut and wants this to go away. And so I got to go on a tangent just really quick because I think you'll find this interesting, but you might already know this because to be honest, like the whole Epstein thing, there's so many conspiracies, and I have not gone into all of them. But I found out something that I think is new. So you can tell me if you know this or not. So we already know the rumors about Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell. Like he was supposedly a triple agent. He had ties to the Mossad, the KGB. Like he definitely was involved in some top secret intel stuff, right? What I never heard about until like literally this week was Ghislaine's sister, Christine Maxwell. Have you ever heard about her?
No.
Okay. She co-founded a company called Chiliad. And I've never heard of Chiliad, but Chiliad specializes in natural language and intelligence mining of data. And it's used by various intelligence agencies. Okay, like when you start digging into it, it is literally the backbone of the FBI's counterterrorism data warehouse. She like basically built the system that the FBI uses. And, it's a whole lot of tech stuff. Like it makes searching incredibly fast and more efficient. So, like before, it would take 32,000 hours of searching to now with this Chiliad, it takes 30 minutes for like these complex searches. So it completely like restructured the tech behind the FBI. And it was kind of like marketed as they called it the Chiliad Discovery Alert System, which would give like real-time data extraction and alerts, things like names, social security numbers, driver's license. And the reason why they jumped on board with this is it was right after 9/11 when they were looking for terrorists. So that's how like so she goes way back with the intel agencies.
Wow.
Ghislaine Maxwell's sister, Robert Maxwell's daughter. And so, for sure, this is like what the FBI has, but I mean, they're saying that it's much broader, and this has been the thing that's helped the different intelligence agencies talk to one another, like the CIA, the NSA, the DOJ. So she's kind of like connected to pretty much every agency. This is just in the United States. I don't know if this is also in Israel or other countries. So knowing that, and then knowing Ghislaine Maxwell, she had that submarine company, Terramar. Like, who would want a submarine company unless you want like to be under maritime law? And like, you know what I mean? It's just normal people don't just have like a submarine company. She also spoke. I didn't even realize she spoke at like the United Nations and the Council on Foreign Relations. She was very much tied to all of these different organizations that are tied to different governments around the world. So I am fully convinced this whole thing was an operation. And Epstein was just a player. Like, I don't even think he was the mastermind. I think it was Ghislaine and maybe her sister. I don't know. But I think this was all an intel thing, maybe with multiple countries, whether it was the CIA, the Mossad, both, something else, I don't know. But in my mind, it's the only thing that makes sense as to why someone like Trump would just want to sweep it under the rug. Like I truly think that's the only thing that would get him to be like, okay, we can't touch this because it's, our own government that was behind it.
Then be fucking transparent about that. Like, we were talking last week, like, okay, maybe, you know, they're being threatened. Maybe Patel and Bondi and Bongino and Trump, they're all being threatened. Their families are being threatened. Or, maybe this is just so huge that it would cause like a societal collapse, right? If we found out the truth. But like I feel like they could go in so many better directions with this, especially with what you just told me. Like, so you have people connected to Epstein that run the databases for our most secretive government operations. I mean, couldn't you just like come up with a better story and say that like, all the documents were destroyed, like they
Right.
like they were retracted, like we can't find the evidence, like that would just be so much more believable than the shit that they're telling us. And it's just like, I don't, the whole thing just blows my mind. And, to your question you asked me earlier about my thoughts on this whole thing, Megyn Kelly did this really great interview with Liz Wheeler on Friday, and they were talking about this whole thing. And Liz Wheeler, like, she was one of the influencers that was at the White House back in February when, Pam Bondi gave out all the Epstein binders, like it was going to be this huge reveal. And then it was just this total embarrassment because there was nothing new about the case and everyone was pissed. So Wheeler was saying like she really wanted to give Pam Bondi the benefit of the doubt and think that they fucked up, right? She just fucked up. Maybe she thought she had all the information and she didn't really read the case files or whatever to know that there was nothing new in there. Like giving her the benefit of the doubt on that rather than this administration is deliberately trying to lie to us. But after the events of like the past week and everything that's unfolded, what have we seen? The administration has like doubled down on this absolutely ridiculous explanation that no one believes. And now we've got Trump trying to, shove it under the carpet. And I really like before I even listened to this episode, like I don't even know if I mentioned this last week, but I was like, this is really going to fuck with the Trump administration. Like people are not going to believe anything that's going on. It's just going to be like with the Biden admin. And she was explaining like, it's not about Epstein. It's about the fact that this case represents justice against the deep state. Just like you said, it's about the elites, right? And she just put it so well. So I want to play this clip of how she was talking about why this case is such a big deal to Trump supporters.
It's all answered for me. Exactly. And listen, President Trump is smart. He's strategic. He probably has a finger on the pulse of his base better than any politician that I've ever experienced in my lifetime. I do think he's misreading his base on this one. There's a story actually that country singer John Rich tells about having dinner with Trump. And during this dinner, Trump turns to him and says, "Why do people boo at my rallies when I talk about the COVID vaccine?" And then President Trump sat there and he listened to John Rich's answer. And John Rich said, "Because, Mr. President, people have been hurt by the jab." And President Trump listened to what John Rich said. And I think that this is one of those moments that President Trump should listen to his base because people have been hurt by the deep state. And that's what people are associating the Epstein files and the indications that there may have been a government cover up or at least a lack of transparency and a lack of honesty when communicating all of this to us. That's what people associate this with. They associate it with the fact that they want justice for COVID. They want justice for Russiagate. They want justice for the phony Ukraine impeachment. They want justice for the lawfare against President Trump. They want justice for the assassination attempts. They want justice for the rigging of election processes. They want justice for Black Lives Matter riots. They want justice. And there's a phrase that we use often on the Liz Wheeler show. We say we want perp walks and jumpsuits. And not because we're vindictive, not because we're trying to exact some kind of revenge or target our political enemies, but because that represents justice. Justice is actual accountability using our justice system to hold these people who committed crimes accountable. And President Trump may be right. Epstein, a creep. Why are people talking about him? Well, it's not so much that people care about Epstein the person or Epstein the creep. It's that they associate the Epstein files and the government's Attorney General Pam Bondi's mishandling and dishonest communication about this with this open-ended question of, are we actually going to see justice for these egregious wrongdoings like we were promised?
And I think she makes a really good point there, which again takes me back to what I was saying before. Just be fucking transparent. And if you're not going to be transparent, at least come up with a believable narrative that is not this, suicide, nothing more to see here. Like, whether it's the truth or not, it would be better to just tell the public all the documents were destroyed. We can't find any evidence because that would be way more believable than the shit that they've been feeding us. And she said the same fucking thing that like Pam Bondi and Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, they should have just come out and said like, look, the evidence was destroyed. The files are empty. And you could say we don't know if it was negligence on, the FBI, or if it was purposeful, or if there was a cover up, but we cannot produce you what we promised because we don't have it. Like, instead of saying definitively it was a suicide, why couldn't
Right.
they say, we don't know if it was a homicide because we don't have the evidence? Again, that would have been way more believable than the story that we're being fed. And I think that Trump supporting this narrative is the wrong move. And I don't think that his base is just going to accept this and move on. And I think this is doing real damage to this administration's credibility. And Wheeler also said that, he should fire Pam Bondi and replace her with Harmeet Dillon. What do you think about that?
I agree 100%. I don't think Pam Bondi's doing a good job. Um, really with anything, to be honest. Like she can't handle the job. And I think the only thing that is going to get Trump out of this mess and kind of get his base back on his side as if he gets rid of her. I really think that's the only thing. And Harmeet Dillon, I am very impressed with her. I mean, she's been in there like a few weeks and she's already, I think doing way more than Pam Bondi has done, over the last whatever months. So I think that could be a winning strategy for Trump, but it doesn't sound, I mean, he's backing Pam Bondi. I don't think he's going to do it.
No, he is doubling down on Pam Bondi because he made a whole Truth Social post where he said she's doing a fantastic job, and he, did his thing in all caps where he's like, let Pam Bondi do her job. She's great. 1 year ago, our country was dead. Now it's the hottest country anywhere in the world. Let's keep it that way and not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about. And again, I think he's wrong because we do care about it. And I agree with Wheeler. This is about justice and accountability that was, promised by this administration and was like one of the biggest things of their campaign. And then now it's just like, oh, never mind, drop it. Like, I just don't think that's going to go over well. And like I want to bring up something else that's questionable to me, and I want to get your take on this. Yesterday, Trump announced that we're going to be sending Patriot missiles to Ukraine. And he said that they are desperately needed because, quote, Putin really surprised a lot of people. He talks nice and then he bombs everybody in the evening, end quote. And so Reuters and The Guardian are both reporting that two unnamed but familiar sources have said that Trump intends to invoke presidential drawdown authority, just like Biden did, to send a weapons package to Ukraine that will be valued at around 300 million. And Trump hasn't disclosed any specific details yet or timelines or the amount of missiles that we're sending. So I don't know if this 300 million number is accurate. But this decision is a very clear reversal of what Trump said earlier this month when, he paused U.S. arms shipments to Ukraine. And so I think on top of the Epstein thing, this is going to generate a lot of anger as well with his base because it's another shift in the narrative of what was promised during his presidential campaign. And, he did say the EU is going to fully reimburse us for the cost, but there's no details on that either. So I just think this is another like bad move.
It's a really bad move, and it's very, very deflating, especially for people like you and I who've spent the last 3 years talking about this and how much he's needed in the White House to turn things around. And then he gets in there, and what it's looking like is the deep state got to him, the military, whoever, whether it's Israel or the military industrial complex or like the elite, whoever, the bad people, because nobody wants this. Nobody wants more money going to Ukraine. And he's just like, these are more campaign promises that he's not keeping. But on the flip side, I have to play devil's advocate as well, because in that long post that he did, I think the point that he was trying to make is while we're all busy arguing about Epstein, a guy who's dead and we're never going to get answers on, there's all these other good things that are happening, but all the good things are being overshadowed by, the the bad thing, the Epstein thing, and I get that. And I do think this is where the one thing that Democrats have over Republicans is they stick together no matter what. When Biden
Yeah.
was a shit show and everyone knew it, they didn't talk about it. They didn't complain about him until they had a plan to replace him.
Mhm.
Republicans are not that way because I feel like there's more integrity. And so you call it like you see it. But I do think that that like can hurt the party moving forward. But for me personally, like I'm not even kidding when I say what has transpired here has made me want to just give up on talking about this shit because it's like if someone like Trump still can get taken over by the deep state, then that makes me feel like there is no hope moving forward. And in
Yeah.
another 3 years, whoever gets in there, even more so, because there's not going to be
Mhm.
another person like him that can stand up to them. And it's just really disheartening. And it's like nothing's going to change. Congress is still a shit show. They're still trying to distract us with nonsense. The deep state's taken over. Like, I just feel so freaking deflated.
Yeah, I was gonna bring this up later, but you just like opened the door for me, so I'm
Sorry.
gonna
I
bring it
just
up
had to
now.
go with it, you
No,
know?
no, did you happen to listen to Tucker's interview with George Santos on Friday?
I didn't listen to the whole thing, but I have seen clips, like bits and pieces on social media, which were kind of entertaining because this guy is like, he's kind of like a goof, you know? He's
He's
just,
hilarious. Oh my God, he's so hilarious. And like when I started listening, I was like, who the hell is George Santos? And then I was like, oh, right, the guy that got like expelled from Congress. And he was a Republican rep from New York. He was literally in Congress for less than a year. This
yeah.
was in 2023. And I remember we briefly talked about it on the podcast, but we didn't really go into a lot of detail. But he was expelled after this investigation by the House Ethics Committee, and ah, he ended up being sentenced to 87 months in prison for identity theft and wire fraud. And this all happened back in August of last year. But this interview, he was like hilarious. And I guess I didn't know this. He was like the first openly gay Republican elected to Congress as a freshman. And he like laid it all out. He told his whole story. And I honestly thought it was very interesting. And I think he's kind of wrongfully going to prison for some pretty benign shit compared to actual
Wasn't it like
violent
he
criminals.
lied about being Jewish or something? Like,
He did lie, like he made up a bunch of stuff about his education, but
okay.
this all has to do with like they're saying identity theft and wire fraud with like campaign funds and stuff like that, but it was like maybe $50,000 or something. And like compared to violent criminals who get 3 months probation, like this guy literally is getting 7 years in like a medium security prison. So like he's going to prison with regular criminals.
Hmm.
And this is like such a, I mean, a crime is a crime, but this, comparatively speaking, like I think there is some political persecution here with the crimes that he's committed. But the reason I even want to talk about this interview is because since he's going to prison, he's like, fuck it. He has this no holds barred attitude about exposing the truth about Congress and revealing how it's exactly like the shit show theater performance that we're always saying it is. And it was just so refreshing to hear this confirmation from someone who was on the inside. So I have a couple clips that I want to play. So I don't know if I have these in the right order, but let's see.
You see
Oops.
people who were really your friends. She decided to go totally sideways on me and use me as a punching line and all
Wait
that,
a
but didn't
minute.
vote to expel me. Didn't vote to expel me, and I respect her for that.
I don't know why my phone does this. That is not the one I wanted to play. So let me go back. So he was talking about how Congress is just like a big party, okay? And here's one of the clips. I hate my phone.
Yeah, mine, I'm
Oh
very
my
frustrated with
God.
it.
Why is this not playing? Oh, I'm gonna.
Tucker
Here we go.
would show up so wasted. They would have to sit in the cloakroom and hand their voting cards to sober members to go do their job.
Actually?
Yeah, and that's actually against House rules. I've seen that in my cloakroom. I know it happens in the Democrat cloakroom because I've exchanged notes with a fellow freshman. He's like, "Ah, it happens here too. It's a shit show." So yeah, I've watched groups of some of my colleagues, some guys who I genuinely like a lot, sit in the corner of the cloakroom completely inebriated, incapable of walking outside, standing still, sticking their card and pressing yay or nay and back, especially when we had long amendment battles with 70 amendments.
Yeah.
They just hand their cards and say, just vote whichever we're going to vote. I mean, it's the only thing you just don't make me look crazy. I've seen it. I've personally seen it. So, and nobody's ever probably going to have the cojones to come here and tell you this.
Clearly no one has respect for the institution, obviously.
Zero. Members leave DC to go back home sometimes under the hush hush, but they're still voting because someone else is voting for them. That's criminal.
That actually happens?
Yeah, that happens. I've seen it.
Well, that's illegal.
Well, that's what I said. It's criminal.
Wow.
It's not hard to pull up flight logs and do a tabulation of wait, how could you be in two places at the same time? The FAA keeps strict flight logs.
Yes, they do.
It's not very hard to prove that what I'm saying is fact. It's just do an investigation and you'll see.
Why don't...
Okay, so that's one of the things he said.
Okay, first of all, give this guy a Bravo reality show because
I know
he totally has the personality for that. And number two, this makes me think of something kind of off topic, but do you remember I don't know, this was a few months ago, Anna Paulina Luna, who's one of my favorite Republican reps, but then her and this other Democrat rep, they made this whole big deal about how there needs to be what do you call it? Remote voting because they both had babies and they were we shouldn't have to fly back and forth every day to DC to vote when we just gave birth. So at the time I was okay, well, that's your job. Don't become a congressman then. But if they're seeing that where people are showing up and they're drunk and everything else, I would be yeah, this is ridiculous. If you can show up drunk, then I can vote from home. So that's all making sense to me now why they're so pissed off. And the Democrat woman is literally bringing her baby. You'll see her giving interviews and she's holding an infant and it's moving around and loud. But I would be that way too if that's what you're dealing with.
Dude, he went into depth on all the scandals, all the corruption, all the shit that gets covered up in Congress. And he was basically they are not serious about passing a balanced budget. They don't make any meaningful decisions. It's nothing but political theater. He brought up how Elon Musk basically risked half of his fortune by deciding to join the government and chair Doge. And in the end, he's what was it for? Because none of the cuts he recommended have been codified by Congress. He went into details about how members of Congress invite reporters into their offices for interviews and then make moves on them, all the weird sex stuff that takes place. I guess they have something called the Congressional cages, which is storage units in the basement. And that's where people go to have sex with staffers and this whole power and control fetish mentality that goes on in Congress. It's everything that we've fucking talked about on this podcast. He's this is just not a serious place. He said it's an overpaid and very expensive high school is the energy in there. And that it's just there's nothing serious going on. And I'm I felt very vindicated to some extent because you and I talk all the time about how Congress is a shit show. And it's what's the point? What's the point of any of this?
Yeah. Well, you and I have been doing this long enough to see it doesn't matter who is in office, who's the president. The same shit happens in Congress. It really It does not matter. I am fully convinced it's a theater performance. You're convinced. We talk about it all the time. And these are the people that we're supposed to trust with our wallets, basically, with all of the money that we give to the government and with passing laws. And this is what they're focused on, and it's just kind of going back to like what we talked about last week with Elon Musk wanting to form that America Party and how he was really focusing on like House and Senate seats. And I can get behind that. Like we need to do something. Congress needs to be changed. Number one, we need term limits, but unfortunately, that's never going to happen because they have to vote for it, and they're not going to vote for their own resignation after a certain number of years. But I feel like if people that have money, like Elon Musk, can fund people that are not currently in there, that's how you can get these guys to switch out because otherwise they're in there so long and this shit happens.
But why does Congress have that power? Why do the people not have that power? Because
Right.
I would think most of the nation would agree that Congress should have term limits.
Yeah.
Shouldn't there be some way for the power of the people in this democratic republic that we're supposed to have to vote on creating term limits for Congress without getting approval from Congress?
Yeah,
Like,
why can't we do that on the ballot? Like we have ballot
right,
measures locally, if we
right.
want to do things in our state or our county or whatever, why can't we have that same ability at the federal level of like, should people have term limits? Yes. Everyone would vote yes. I don't think there's a
Yeah.
damn person, either Democrat or Republican, that would vote no for that unless
Yeah,
they're
and
in
it's
Congress.
right, exactly. And they shouldn't be allowed to vote if you're in Congress. And it's like to your point that you were saying earlier when you were talking about how, the Democrats stick together, like through the whole Biden cover up, they stuck together, right? And why
Mhm.
are Republicans not doing the same? And I think a lot of it is the fact that, like, this is not even the Republican Party. Like,
Right.
the whole MAGA movement, as we talked about numerous times, was like its own party that ran under the Republican ticket. So people voted Republican who are not Republicans because they were voting for this change with Trump. And so, how can you have a party on the same page when they're not even the same party members to begin with?
Yeah. No, that's exactly
And
right.
that's where I think like this going back to the America Party again, like I think it could actually be a viable option.
I think it could too, but back to like my original point about feeling deflated, I basically feel like what's happened here with the Epstein thing and then with what you just said about Trump sending money to Ukraine is that at the end of the day, the people that we elect, that we vote for, aren't really the ones in control. There are
Right.
people in these intel agencies or whatever that are making all the decisions, and it doesn't look like that is ever going to change. And that's what's so deflating about the whole thing. And it's like, yeah, we could make some changes to Congress and like maybe that would help. But then again, like I said last time, they'll just get to them, and it's this vicious cycle that we're stuck in. And it makes me want to just like give up on talking about it. It's like so aggravating that that's where we're at. It's like the same bullshit that we heard with the Biden administration.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that really sucks. Now, there are good things, like Trump said in his posts, there are good things that are happening that are being overshadowed. But then with the good also comes the bad because it's like the media and the left will do everything they can to destroy anything that he actually puts forth in his agenda. So back to like, the whole immigration issue and ICE, there's a lot happening on that front, but it's like they're constantly being fought against. So the most recent was an ICE raid at a pot farm in California. And, it's making headlines because the left showed up to quote unquote protest. Okay. But by protest, I mean throwing rocks at ICE vehicles and shooting a pistol at an ICE agent. And so ICE and CBP, executed criminal warrants at two Glass House Farms facilities and ended up arresting around 200 to 319 undocumented individuals. And there were at least 10 to 14 children, some as young as 14, that were found working on site in this pot farm. Okay. And so, of course, what can you conclude from that? It's forced labor or it's trafficking, most likely. So, anyhow, with that being said, I have to play this clip for you, okay? This is going to freaking blow your mind. So, this is Jillian Michaels went on CNN and she's talking about this child labor. And the CNN host is literally trying to defend like the fact that children were working at a marijuana farm. So let me just play the clip.
The glass farm, a glass house marijuana farm. Here's what people don't want to see. On the other side, they don't want to see people throwing rocks into the cars of federal agents. They don't want to hear that someone supposedly opened fire on them. They also don't want to learn that there are a bunch of kids there that are undocumented or unaccompanied, and they think this is crazy talk, and we should be focusing on that. And for one thing, how did those kids get there?
Well, I just want to add one thing. We do have to go, but the UFW, the United Farm Workers, put out a statement about this. They said the UFW can confirm farm workers were critically injured yesterday during chaotic raids in Ventura County, California. Others, including U.S. citizens, remain totally unaccounted for. Many workers, including U.S. citizens, were held by federal authorities at the farm for 8 hours or more. U.S. citizen workers report only being released after they were forced to delete photos and videos of the raid from their phones. They also added that farm work is exempted from child labor. So
you're telling me undocumented?
I'm not saying the undocumented. I'm not talking about the
marijuana farm.
I'm not talking about the undocumented part, but according to this statement, in this country, not just at farm, and not at marijuana farms, at all farms.
Look at the reality. I'm just saying. Talking about how did an unaccompanied, undocumented 14-year-old,
Jillian, I believe, and many people might believe, children should be subject to child labor laws. But it's true in this country that when it comes to agricultural work, they're not. And that includes marijuana farms. So the legality of their status is a separate issue, but the fact of children being there is not actually something that is necessarily illegal.
I have a really hard time.
So there's that. So it's not unusual for there to be teenagers and working in a farm.
Can work at a marijuana growing.
It doesn't matter whether it's a marijuana farm or an apple farm. Okay, it's agriculture. They're not.
If that's the law, that's outrageous.
They're cultivating it. The point is, this incident, and we're still learning a lot more about it. Was very dangerous and put a lot of people, including ICE officers and those immigrants, in danger.
Federal law enforcement agents.
I don't know if you could hear that last part because the woman was talking over her, but Jillian Michaels is like, then don't attack federal law enforcement agents and maybe people wouldn't get hurt. But can you believe that shit?
That is such an asinine argument, first of all. And like, even the company itself, the Glass House company, they are saying that they have never knowingly violated applicable hiring practices and have never employed minors. So they're basically saying, we know it's illegal to hire minors and we've never, quote unquote, knowingly done it. So like they
haven't knowingly done it because they did it under the table and they didn't document it because they're undocumented. They're illegals. Like the fact though that this woman, like she is willing to die on this hill that there's no problem with children working on a marijuana farm. Like, okay, the farm child labor laws has to do with like family farms. Like if a child lives on a farm and is helping their dad or whatever. And she thinks this is absolutely okay because that's what they want. They want cheap labor. They have no problem with like modern day slavery of like forced labor and trafficking. I just cannot believe.
As long as they can get their cheap produce.
Yeah. I mean, that was just crazy. I'm like, that's really what you're going to make this conversation about, that it's totally fine. Absolutely ridiculous. And then, of course, Gavin Newsom has to comment, and he's calling the raid inhumane. Not the fact
Well,
that the children were forced laborers, but
yeah,
saving them,
well,
that's inhumane.
is that surprising? It shouldn't be because the president of Glass House Farms donated $10,000 to Newsom's political campaign back in 2018. So of course he's going to go to bat for them.
Of course. This guy, I mean, I just roll my eyes now. Like, you can't take anything he says seriously. It's ridiculous. So, like, what the quote unquote protesters and local officials are criticizing is the use of tear gas, rubber bullets, and militarized response tactics. But just like
Which
Jillian, go ahead.
I was going to say, none of that would have happened if you didn't have a bunch of fucking protesters, quote unquote, showing up
Yeah.
and throwing shit at ICE.
Right. I mean, just like Jillian Michaels said, like, don't attack law enforcement agents. Like,
Right.
that is, everyone knows that. Everyone knows you don't attack an officer. Otherwise, you're putting yourself at risk. But no, like, now it's their fault, the officer's fault. The United Farm Workers is calling it violent and cruel and warning of disruptions to food supply chains. Like, oh my gosh, you might not get your marijuana now because this place was raided. Um, Meanwhile, DHS and Customs and Border Protection praised the operation, and they said they rescued minors and arrested criminals, including someone with past violent offenses. So yeah, I'm gonna side with them on this one.
Yeah, the guy with the violent offenses, from what I read, he has been convicted of kidnapping, attempted rape, and attempted child molestation. But yeah, let's just let him work with 14-year-olds on a pot farm.
Yeah, these are the types of people that, the left wants to help, not regular American citizens, just criminals. So President Trump granted ICE authorization to use, quote, whatever means necessary, end quote, to protect officers against violent protests. And I agree. Like, they're doing their job, and someone shot a pistol at one of them. I mean, give me a break. You can't do that and get away with it. Also, the FBI offered a $50,000 reward for information on the person who shot at the ICE agents. And then in addition, there was a 57-year-old farm worker, Jamie Alanis Garcia, that fell around 30 feet from a greenhouse roof. He was initially reported dead, but then confirmed that he was deceased on July 12th after being taken off life support. So I guess he was injured, put on life support, and then died. So that complicates things. And so now you have another federal judge that is issuing a temporary restraining order limiting aggressive tactics, citing concerns over civil rights violations. So this will be interesting to watch this case and see where it goes, considering the Supreme Court just had that ruling that limits the use of these nationwide injunctions issued by lower courts. So I don't know if it's going to hold or not. But like, limiting use of aggressive tactics, what are you supposed to do when people are shooting at you and you're an
Right.
officer with a warrant?
Yeah.
Like,
How about a federal judge issue a temporary restraining order limiting aggressive tactics by the fucking public,
yeah,
which is already illegal.
right.
So,
Yep, I
oh
agree.
my God, it's just I'm so sick of this fucking narrative from the left with ICE. And again, I know we talk about polls and polls are bullshit, but every poll is consistently showing that the American public is still on board with Trump's decision or Trump's trying to get the illegals out of our country because that's what we fucking voted for. And so I'm
Right.
just so sick of this. And of course, Newsom's using this whole thing for his, I'm preparing for my presidential campaign. And I guess JD Vance and his family went to Disneyland in California over the weekend, like a personal trip. This wasn't like a business thing.
Hmm.
But I guess there was like a video online. So Newsom shared this video of Vance and his family having fun, and he posted it on X and he said, I hope you enjoy your family time, JD Vance. The families you're tearing apart certainly won't. And then you had like 150 protesters that showed up at Disneyland to protest JD Vance and his family being there because of all this immigration enforcement that's going on. And you know what? I love JD's response because he was basically like, yeah, thanks. We had a great time.
Good for him. Because I feel like that's another like instance of them trying to like incite violence. Like, if you post that, people are going to show up and
Exactly.
try to harm him and his family when they're visiting
Yep.
your state, spending money in your state on vacation. Like, absolutely ridiculous. But keep going with that narrative, Newsom. You'll never win because the majority of Americans do not agree with that.
Yep.
Okay, I have to completely switch gears and we have to talk about something else like freaky going on. So, remember how you were like obsessed with talking about the bird flu and how millions of chickens were being killed because they could have been infected? And we were saying, like, this is one big conspiracy to mess with our food supply. Well, we are about to see the same thing with cattle because we have something called the New World screwworm. And I'm like, who named this? Like the New World screwworm. It sounds like a World Economic Forum agenda. So AJ Richards, he was that rancher that we had on like a couple of years ago. And he did a video on TikTok about this and was saying, like, this is a really big issue that we need to be paying attention to because it can really mess with our food supply, especially considering it's happening at a time when I guess like cattle inventory is already low. So what happens is these flies, they're like larva settles into like an open wound in cattle, but really it could be any mammal, like even humans. And then these screwworms like hatch and they feed on it. So normally worms will only feed on dead flesh, but this worm will like burrow into living flesh and keep eating it until the animal dies. And so it's really creepy. And I guess this was contained, but like ever since 2023, it reemerged like in Panama with over 6,500 cases. But now it's spread throughout Central America and Mexico, all the way up to like it's 370 miles away from Texas. So it's like getting right up to our border where they're seeing cases. And so the USDA has temporarily halted live cattle, horse, and bison imports from Mexico since May. But what AJ Richards was saying is that these big companies are trying to speed up the process of importing from Mexico because they don't want to keep losing out on profits. But he's saying if you speed up the process and then the screwworm gets here in the United States, that can mess up the whole supply chain. So between like this and then the Nipah virus, like there is a lot to keep an eye on. And
Yeah, I want to say something about this because I didn't totally go down the rabbit hole with it, but apparently, like, there's declassified military documents from the 50s and 60s discussing the viability of using screwworms and like other parasitic insects for like incapacitating enemy populations. So this is definitely like a very viable like bioweapon.
well, that's when it emerged, was like in the 50s and 60s. It was a really big deal back then. And then they got it contained and now it's back again. So yeah, it makes you wonder, like same thing with the Nipah virus, if it's a biological weapon, which by the way, I have some interesting updates on this whole Nipah virus. Okay, so CEPI, which is the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, they are providing $17.3 million to public health vaccines to support mid-stage human trials for the Nipah vaccine. So the human trials are like really taking off. So CEPI was officially launched at Davos during the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in January of 2017. In fact, the World Economic Forum is explicitly listed as one of the founding entities alongside the governments of Norway, India, where the Nipah virus is currently having an outbreak, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Wellcome Trust. Oh, and Wikipedia says that CEPI quote, embodies the WEF ethos of public-private cooperation to shape global agendas, with both entities sharing ties to foundations, governments, pharmaceutical corporations, regulators, and civil society. So basically, they're putting it all out there. Like, this is the globalist agenda, and they're using this to, put forward like the new world order that the World Economic Forum has talked about forever. Oh, and by the way, CEPI and the US Department of Defense, they announced a new agreement back in May that will enable the two organizations to collaborate on projects and expand global defenses against disease outbreaks. And guess what the first project is? They are working on the development of a Nipah monoclonal antibody. So I am telling you, this is the next pandemic. You've got Bill Gates, you've got the World Economic Forum, you have the Department of Defense. Come on. This is very concerning. I'm terrified.
Yeah. Oh my God. I think we need to like deep dive on this.
Seriously, it just keeps getting worse the more I do. It's like they're definitely planning something, and I don't know. I'm just like being very cautious, but hoping that I'm wrong. So we'll see. All right, so I ended on a terrifying note again. Great way to start off the week. So happy Monday, everyone. Hopefully we can come up with some better, more positive news for Wednesday. But thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you back here then.